Fearless secretary reveals incredible truth about Millionaire CEO, changing everything forever. The stack of files felt heavier today. Each memo, each report sent a tremor of unease packing into Sarah's heart as she organized Mark's office. This pristine glass building, a monument to ambition, had started to feel like a cage. Her role as a diligent secretary, once a source of pride, now felt tethered to something darker. The driving energy of the bustling city outside clashed with her growing doubts. Mark, the charismatic CEO, so successful, so polished. Did the shimmer hide a tarnished truth? Sarah meticulously cleared Mark's desk, trying to quell the storm brewing in her mind. Her children were the anchors guiding her through turbulent waters, but as the grass grew greener in their lives, she began to wonder at the price. What was the ethical cost of Mark's lavish lifestyle that her small-town values had taught her to hold dear? She admired his drive, yet there was a whisper of discomfort gnawing at her conscience. Her fingers grazed a document, the ink still boldly fresh. Curiosity overpowered hesitance, and as she sifted through the pile, the image of her childhood home flickered to life. The family business, once a symbol of community and integrity, now an echo trapped under Mark's empire. The revelation was a shockwave. How could she work for the man responsible for its demise? Panic encased her heart like a vice. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The documents turned her unease into bitter anguish, a reflection of her father's legacy now tainted by corporate greed. Mark's name was attached to strategies that directly aligned with the catastrophe that crushed her father's dream. Fault lines appeared in her loyalty. The man she once respected stood on shaky ground. She struggled for breath even as she felt the pressure curling around her throat closing in. Each tick of the clock urged her to make a choice, looming like a predator waiting to pounce. Did she confront Mark? Did she risk everything for integrity, or keep her head down and continue the charade? The thought of her children's future clawed at her resolve. Without a job, what would become of them? Whole days spent nurturing their potential could collapse under the weight of her moral dilemma. As she read a particularly disturbing report detailing decisions made that sacrificed local jobs for profit, the tension swelled. Could she bear the burden of inaction, knowing her father would have wanted her to fight for what was right? But was Mark truly the villain? As she imagined confronting him, she felt the familiar flicker of compassion. Was it fair to judge without seeing his sacrifices? As she stood on that precipice, breathing irregularly, muscles tensed, she realized their stories intertwined, each holding pieces of the truths. The phone rang, jolting her back as dark, looming clouds began to gather. How far would she go to protect the legacy she wove in silence? Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, her mind spinning with the magnitude of her last decision. The stakes lay heavy, but her heart demanded release. Would she bury the truth or unleash a revelation that could change everything? The door to Mark's office cracked open. She held her breath, prepared to speak her truth. But with it came doubt and terrible uncertainty. Would she step into the light, risking everything for justice? As the door creaked open, Sarah felt a wave of panic wash over her, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. Mark stepped into the room, exuding his usual confidence, that intoxicating blend of charisma and authority that had initially drawn her in. He looked expectant, as if sensing her turmoil but misreading it entirely. She swallowed hard, battling the whirlwind of emotions threatening to envelop her. For a moment, time froze as she searched his expression, wanting to find some evidence of humanity beneath the layers of corporate success. Did he carry guilt for the lives impacted by his decisions? Or was he shielded by a fortress of ambition that rendered him immune to the human cost of his triumphs? "Sarah, everything all right?" His voice cut through the silence, a smooth blend of concern and curiosity. Just organizing some files, she managed, hoping her faltering facade could withstand his probing gaze. But the words felt like ashes in her mouth. What were files compared to the unsettling reality gripping her heart? She could sense her chance slipping away, the internal debate about whether to speak up tangling her thoughts further. It was in moments like these that she remembered her father's resolute stand against injustice. Would he have remained silent? No. His voice would have risen, unwavering and strong. With resolve, she thought of her children's future, the values she wanted to instill in them, the legacy she wanted to uphold. "Mark, do you have a moment?" The words escaped her lips almost on instinct. He raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the sudden shift in her demeanor. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Taking a deep breath, she said, "I've been going through some reports and I don't understand the decisions being made." With each sentence, her voice grew steadier, fueled by a mix of anxiety and purpose. "The local jobs lost, the compromised ethics, it's all tied to our community. We're hurting people, Mark, and I can't stay quiet." The surprise flickered across his face, swiftly replaced by a defensive posture. His expression hardened. "It's business, Sarah. Sometimes sacrifices must be made for the greater good and for the company's future. You know that." Is sacrificing people really justified for profit? Her retort was sharper than she intended, yet it felt invigorating. Each word was a release, cutting through the fog of complacency that had clouded her judgment. "Look, you need to understand. Every decision we make is analyzed through the lens of profitability. Lives are part of this equation." His irritation began to bubble beneath the surface, but she pressed on. "And what about lives that aren't part of your analysis? My father believed in community, Mark. This company was built on principles you seem to have forgotten." The words tumbled out before she had a chance to filter them, an irrepressible truth spilling forth. She watched as he processed her accusations, a flicker of conflict dancing in his eyes. There was vulnerability beneath his polished exterior, and Sarah recognized it was her opening. She needed to discover if her instinct about his sacrifice was grounded in reality or just a figment of desperation. "I've worked hard, built this company with a vision in mind," he deflected, but it lacked conviction. "The stakes are high. We have to stay competitive. So competitive that you're willing to sacrifice your integrity." Her tone softened, challenging his defenses with vulnerability of her own. "Is this who you want to be?" For a heartbeat, silence enveloped them, a tangible weight thick with potential. The tension morphed into something deeper, a revelation hanging in the air, ready to surface. She saw something flicker in his expression, perhaps recognition, perhaps confusion. "Sarah," he began, but the rest of his words faltered. In that moment she realized they were at a crossroads, two stories colliding where truths could either be a catalyst for change or a sudden collision leading to chaos. With her heart racing, she asked herself if she was prepared for the consequences to come. The door was open now. Both were on the precipice of transformation. Would Mark truly hear her? Could they rebuild what had been torn apart? The stakes had never been this high. "Can we discuss possible changes moving forward?" The question hung, fragile, yet charged. Would he step into the light and join her in this fight for integrity, or would he turn away, closing the door once more? The answer awaited, heavy and precarious, in the air between them. The tension in the room had reached a palpable crescendo, the air thick with unspoken possibilities. Sarah felt as if they were suspended in time, her heart racing as she fixated on Mark's conflicted expression. Would he recognize the truth of her words or shrink away into the comfortable shadows of corporate justifications? "Mark," she pressed, infusing a sense of urgency into her voice. "I don't want to jeopardize what we've built, but I believe we're losing our way. There's more at stake here than profits. People count on us." For a flicker of a moment she saw something shift within him, a crack in the facade of confidence, perhaps a hidden vulnerability that questioned all he had stood for. It vanished quickly, replaced by a guarded hostility. "Sarah, this isn't personal. It's business. You need to understand the pressure we're under." The acknowledgement of pressure, it was a start. But isn't that the point, she urged, taking a step closer, the distance between them symbolizing the chasm of understanding yet to be bridged. We're not just numbers on a spreadsheet, our decisions affect lives. You have the ability to make a change. I want to assist you, but we have to be aligned in our vision. Mark exhaled sharply, his guarded stance betraying a flicker of internal conflict. You don't know what it's like to sit in my chair, Sarah. Risk is the name of the game. It's naive to think we can operate based solely on ethics in this world. But can we afford not to? She countered, emboldened. Each word that left her mouth was an invitation for deeper introspection. What message does that send? Is being successful worth compromising our values? I know the impact of our choices will ripple far beyond this boardroom. Suddenly a new thought struck her. Do you think our employees would agree with how we're handling things? If they realized we're prioritizing profits over their livelihoods, they would feel betrayed. Silence fell again, thick and heavy as Mark processed her words. Sarah could hardly believe the audacity of her own speech. It was one thing to think these thoughts, but another entirely to voice them directly to the man at the helm. And yet, as fear receded, determination flooded in its place. She was reclaiming her voice and perhaps something much larger than herself. We should conduct a survey, Mark finally suggested, his voice measured and thoughtful. Get a read on employee sentiment. Maybe there's something worth exploring. A surge of hope coursed through her. Exactly. It's a start. Let's involve everyone in the conversation. Seek transparency. This could foster trust, not just between you and the employees, but among the leadership team too. The flicker of hope in his eyes ignited her determination. But we need to act now, Mark. The longer we wait, the deeper the disconnect grows. This isn't just about us. It's about laying the groundwork for a future where integrity triumphs. Okay, he said slowly, the gravity of her plea hanging in the air. Let's see how this could play out. The decision hung between them like a tightrope, each step forward requiring a balance of courage and vulnerability. As the possibility of change loomed, Sarah felt the excitement and fear transform into a different kind of anticipation. She was stepping out of the shadows and into a role that demanded leadership, and yet the path remained uncertain. As she started to map out the steps for their proposed survey in her mind, a new concern tugged at her consciousness. What if the desire for change unveiled antagonistic forces within the company? What if her own resolve would lead to unexpected backlash, potentially risking her own position? The moment of truth loomed ahead, demanding action and accountability. Would she be able to maintain her resolve when opposition surfaced? Only time would reveal the answers, and with each heartbeat, Sarah felt the stakes increase. Mark, I have a feeling this is just the first step. We might be walking into uncharted territory, she warned, a gravity in her tone that betrayed her underlying trepidation. Yes, he replied, his resolve seemingly reasserted. But I think we're ready for it. Yet as she left her office that day, an unsettling thought nagged at her. What if the forces in opposition were closer than she realized? The knowledge that change often birthed unrest loomed over her like a gathering storm. The door had been opened to possibility, but what awaited her on the other side could prove to be a battleground she was unprepared for. Would her courage be enough to confront the oncoming tide? Or would it start to erode the ground beneath her? The questions plagued her as she turned the corner, and somewhere beneath her excitement, uncertainty began to fester. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows throughout the office, Sarah sat at her desk, staring blankly at her computer screen, the glow of digital numbers flashing before her like a strobe light. The urgency of her recent confrontation with Mark swirled in her mind, mixed with thoughts of potential outcomes, both positive and negative. She could feel the weight of what lay ahead pressing down on her shoulders, yet buried within that pressure was a sliver of determination igniting. She typed out a rough outline for the employee survey, her fingers flying over the keys as she set her thoughts into motion. Each question she drafted felt like a step toward something greater, toward transparency, authenticity, and a return to the company's foundational values. With each suggestion she wrote, her belief solidified that their workforce deserved better, They deserved to be heard and respected. This was her moment, an opportunity to drive real change into the heart of the organization. Then, a dreaded thought flitted through her consciousness. What if she approached the employees, and they reacted negatively? Would they see her as a traitor to the corporate cause, a cause she had initially believed in? Would they turn her own determination into adversity? The yawning uncertainty of the unknown loomed ominously, whispering doubt into her mind. It clawed at her intuition, reminding her of the risks involved. Pausing, she leaned back in her chair, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath. She needed to frame her perspective differently. This wasn't merely about survival in the corporate machine. It was about aligning her passion for people with her goals. If they lash out at me, she murmured to herself, I will keep pushing forward, because in the end, I'll have done something meaningful. The faint ringing of her phone interrupted her thoughts. It was Mark. A new flutter of anxiety shot through her. Had he reconsidered? Was he backing out at the first sign of opposition? She answered, forcing confidence into her voice. Sarah, Mark began, his voice steady but not devoid of an edge. I've had time to think since our last conversation. Are you still set on this survey? Absolutely, she answered without hesitation. We need genuine responses from our employees. This is the first step to rebuilding trust. He paused, as if measuring her enthusiasm. I want to support it, but I think we should discuss it together first. Weigh potential risks and how we might address them. Let's not act impulsively. The suggestion rankled at her, but she quelled the instinctual irritation. Every moment was like walking a tightrope between her convictions and the palpable risk of first steps on this new path. I appreciate your caution, Mark. We must be strategic about this. She felt a surge of satisfaction when he agreed to meet the next day to finalize the survey. Before hanging up, she reminded herself that she had successfully sparked dialogue where there had been none. Mark's acknowledgement that they needed to move forward with care was a sign that he was beginning to see the value in her perspective. As she settled back into her seat, a sudden electrical shift coursed through her. This process of change was no longer a distant possibility. It had begun. Sinking into her chair for a brief moment of contemplation, she realized this was not just a campaign for employee sentiments. It was a pivotal moment in her own journey toward leadership. But amidst her newfound confidence, another unsettling sensation emerged. The more she pushed for change, the more she would attract scrutiny. Who within the company would stand against her? And how far would her allies actually go to support her? Just as she began to delve into these doubts, her office door swung open abruptly. Sarah looked up, heart pounding. It was Mara, the head of HR, a woman who had both mentored and challenged her over the years, with a reputation for her hasty decisions. Sarah, Mara said, her tone urgent. We need to talk. I've heard whispers about your plans. It's becoming a topic of discussion, and it might not be for the reasons you hope. The implications of those words settled uncomfortably as the tension rose between them. Sarah's heart raced. She felt the ground shift beneath her. Was Mara an ally, or was she a harbinger of the unrest threatening to undermine everything? The battle lines were starting to be drawn, and she was right in the crossfire. Tell me everything, Sarah demanded, her pulse quickening with the electric thrill of impending conflict. In that moment, she knew she was not just taking steps toward organizational reform, but teetering on the precipice of her own inevitable confrontation. How far would she have to go to protect her principles? The inquiry left her breathless as she prepared herself for the imminent clash. Would she be prepared for what came next? She was about to find out. Mara stepped closer, her expression an inscrutable mask that hid layers of intention. There are rumors, Sarah, she said, her voice lower now, directly aimed at Sarah's escalating anxiety. Not everyone is on board with this survey idea. Some of the upper management feel it poses a threat to their control. Threat? Sarah echoed, her incredulity barely masking the simmering irritation within her. She had thought Mark's support was a tangible step toward progress, not an anchor dragging her back into murky waters. This isn't about control. It's about building a workplace culture that fosters honesty and encourages feedback. Mara held up her hand, silencing Sarah's instincts to roadblock her progression further. "I want to be straightforward with you," she continued. "I'm invested in our team's success, and that means you have to approach this methodically. Without the proper framing, you could rally resentment instead of support." Frustrated, Sarah paced her small office, pulling on every fiber of her resolve. Every step amplified her determination. "Mara, if we shy away from confronting issues simply because they make some uncomfortable, then we're perpetuating a cycle of silence that has divided us. Have you considered how divisive your push could be?" Mara countered, her eyes narrowing toward Sarah. "It's one thing to want change. It's another to navigate the politics of it. People play these power games because they fear losing what they have." Sarah clenched her fists, bringing the conversation back to the fundamentals that had driven her to this point. "If I stand back now, I'll lose everything I stand for, and I won't let my voice be stifled anymore. I don't want to play their games. I'm tired of pretending everything's all right when it's not." The silence stretched between them, thick and expectant. Mara's gaze softened, and for a split second Sarah wondered if she could find an unexpected ally in this woman who appeared so entrenched in the status quo. But the doubt quickly followed, reminding her of the precariousness of alliances in the corporate world. "Understand this, Sarah," Mara said, the urgency creeping back into her tone. "You may have the passion and the willingness to take risks, but not everyone will share your vision. A great leader also knows when to tread carefully." Grappling with Mara's caution, Sarah felt a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Anger at the stagnancy around her, a rising need for transformation, and herself standing at the crossroads. This was her chance to lead, to pave a new path. But the risks loomed like shadows, distant yet omnipresent. "Then help me," Sarah blurted, surprising even herself. "If you really believe in this organization's potential, help me frame the survey in a way that will resonate with both management and employees. We can turn this into an opportunity rather than a threat." With that, Sarah's vulnerability hung in the air, revealing the delicate strands of ambition she was beginning to weave together. It was a gamble, tapping into Mara's experience to guide her without relinquishing authority over her vision. It could either become a partnership for change, or it could expose her to further critique. Mara's eyes sparkled with a mix of recognition and challenge. "It's not going to be easy, Sarah. I just hope you know what you're getting into." "Trust me," Sarah replied, a new edge sharpening her voice. "I'm ready to step into the fire." As Mara began outlining a strategy, Sarah felt the initial tension ease slightly. Yet simultaneously, she sensed the fracturing foundation beneath her feet. She was wading deeper into a conflict that could derail not just her ambitions, but the entire organization. Every supporting figure could flip into an adversary at a moment's notice. How far was she willing to push? As new ideas flowed, the course of her journey sparked with fresh potential, yet the underlying trepidation crackled. With so much on the line, Sarah understood. This was only the beginning. The firm ground seemed to shift, raising the question, how would she hold on to her vision while standing firm against opposition? As the conversation unfolded, doubt lingered at the edges, reminding her that the very first step had ignited a series of choices leading into unknown territory. Just then, a sudden email notification flashed on her screen, the subject line sending a jolt through her. Company-wide meeting scheduled for later that day, with a focus on upcoming changes. The attention her efforts were starting to generate was palpable, and it made her heart race. What surprises awaited her? How would the dynamics shift now that the stakes had risen? The meeting room felt charged with tension as Sarah entered, the clicks of her heels echoing on the polished floor. Her heart was a drum, each beat a reminder of the commitment she had made. A quick glance around the room confirmed her worst fears. Familiar faces were carved in skepticism, their arms crossed, their expressions neutral yet guarded. Mark sat at the head of the table, a supportive gaze that sparked a flicker of confidence within her. But next to him, the CFO, Brian, presented a stern counterpoint, his ruffled papers the only indication that he was prepared for debate. This was not going to be just another meeting. It was a stage set for confrontation. As she took her seat, Sarah's thoughts darted. The survey was her lifeline, an opportunity to capture the employees' voices and commit to authentic progress. But now it had become a source of tension that rippled through the management. She was painfully aware of the challenges ahead. "Thank you all for joining," Mark began, his voice steady. "Today we'll discuss the significant changes we're undertaking to improve our company culture." With each word he spoke, Sarah gauged the room, searching for allies, the unspoken divides lingering just beneath the surface. It wasn't long before Brian interjected, his tone dismissive. "While we appreciate the effort, I'm not certain a simple survey will resolve the deeper issues affecting our productivity." That sting felt like a slap across the face. Sarah clenched her jaw, reminding herself of her purpose. Rather than succumb to fear, she needed to channel it. Moving forward would mean confronting these doubts head-on. "I disagree," she said, her voice ringing with more authority than she felt. "The survey will give us actionable insights into employee needs, revealing layers that have previously been overlooked." Brian's eyebrow arched, skepticism written across his features. "And if the results show resistance, if people don't embrace it, then we address it," she replied, unwavering. "Ignoring these issues only breeds resentment. We must foster transparency, not sweep things under the rug." The room was silent. It was a moment laced with potential fallout, yet she felt a flicker of resolve. Each gaze trained on her was a question, but she realized they were seeking leadership, not just rhetoric. "I believe that as leaders it is our responsibility to build trust with our teams. This is why I'm requesting that we not only consider the survey, but make it part of our strategic initiatives going forward. If we're to inspire real change, we must show employees we are listening." The challenge in her words hung in the air, and a shift occurred. It was subtle, yet palpable. Mark nodded, eyes unwavering, signaling his support, while a fidgety tension replaced the previously idle skepticism. "Facilitating that dialogue is crucial," Mark added. "We need to offer a safe space for feedback. Let's consider how we can create an effective framework around it." Murmurs rippled around the table and Sarah seized the momentum. "If we can clearly outline the framework and its intended outcomes, we can preemptively address concerns from both management and staff." As she spoke, a renewed energy flowed through her, and the deafening drumbeat of her heartbeat softened into the rhythm of collaboration. With every point made, she felt herself stepping deeper into her authority, each thoughtful response a confirmation of her role as a catalyst for change. But Brian's frown persisted, and she sensed a brewing storm beneath his composed facade. "What makes you think everyone will respond positively? Change is scary, and people often resist it." "I recognize that," Sarah said, determined not to retreat. "But fear should not deter us. Rather, it should incite us to act boldly. If we genuinely care about our employees, we must evoke this discussion." With every response, the stakes heightened. Their reactions were a litmus test of her resolve. Would they rally in support or draw lines in the sand? As the discussion evolved into a muted debate, Sarah felt the weight pressing down. Her credibility was on the line. Then, glancing at the clock, Sarah saw that they were approaching the end of their allotted time. This meeting had been pivotal, not just for her, but for the direction it could set for the entire organization. Yet as the conversation neared its conclusion, she spotted the flicker of opposition in Brian's eyes. He wouldn't back down easily. "Let's make sure we take time to consider all perspectives before jumping into this," he challenged, his tone pointed. Just when Sarah thought Mark's reassuring presence would counteract Brian's tone, a shadowy chill filled the room. If this survey was going to be a success, she needed to pry deeper into what the resistance truly meant. What truths lay beneath their objections? Who would lend their voice, authentic or otherwise? More importantly, would she find the resolve to push past not just Brian, but the inevitable hurdles she hadn't yet counted? As the meeting adjourned, Sarah felt both exhilarated and unsettled. The opposition was just beginning. The questions loomed larger, but so did the potential for profound change. And with each challenge, she could feel herself rising to meet them. But would it be enough? The next step was crucial, and Sarah knew she couldn't ignore the call to confront her growing adversary. As Sarah stepped out of the meeting room, the weight of 1,000 agonizing thoughts crashed over her like a storm. She could feel the air outside buzzing with life, yet all she could focus on was the tension that lingered in her chest, a gnawing sensation accompanied by self-doubt. She leaned against the cool wall, willing herself to breathe deeply. The lingering voices in her mind warred with each other. On one side, the vibrant echoes of her own firm declarations played back. "We must show employees we are listening." Each word had been a step toward claiming authority, yet as she recalled Brian's dismissive gaze, the other voice emerged, one that questioned her competence and intent. Was she truly equipped to lead such a crucial transformation? With an urgent flick of determination, she shook her head, banishing those unwanted thoughts. There was no room for hesitation. She would use this setback to drive her forward. Reflecting on what had transpired, she acknowledged the insights gained. The need to prepare for the inevitable resistance, to understand the roots of the skepticism swirling within her colleagues. The next hour was a whirlwind of action. Sarah returned to her desk, her fingers racing over the keyboard to draft a detailed proposal for the survey framework. She meticulously outlined objectives, strategies for gathering feedback, and methods for ensuring anonymity. Each bullet point served not only as a tactical maneuver but as a manifestation of her resolve. This was not just about reaching a conclusion, it was about fostering a culture where voices were heard. Her phone buzzed. It was Mark, asking her to join him for a quick discussion. With a mixture of anxiety and anticipation, she made her way to his office. As she entered, she was met with an encouraging smile. "That was quite a bold move today," he began, gesturing for her to take a seat. "You handled Brian's pushback well. It's clear you have a vision for this initiative." The sincerity in his voice ignited a flicker of confidence. "Thank you, Mark. I realized I have to understand what's behind their reservations if we want to make an impact. Without that, we can't hope for success." Mark nodded, his eyes gleaming with understanding. "Exactly. But do you feel ready to confront Brian directly? He has supporters, and this will require you to stand firm in your position." Her heart raced at the thought. Confrontation, especially with someone as formidable as Brian, felt like racing along the edge of a cliff. She knew she should avoid drafting plans in her mind. This wasn't just theory, it was about testing herself. "Yes," she responded, meeting his gaze squarely. "I'm willing to address him, but I have to be strategic. I need to know what drives his skepticism. Clearly articulated facts will help," he advised. "But consider this. What if you position the discussion as collaborative rather than conflicting? Your goal is to build bridges, not just rally opposition." The idea resonated deeply within her. Taking this perspective could shift the dynamics in a favorable way, allowing her to truly engage with Brian, transforming an adversarial confrontation into meaningful dialogue. "I can present the survey highlights as data-driven solutions that benefit productivity. He may be more receptive if he sees it as a tactical advantage." Mark leaned back approvingly. "That's the spirit. Remember, leadership is often about navigating difficult relationships, not just making decisions." As she exited the office, a surge of clarity filled her. The initial fear that had clung to her through the chaotic meeting had transformed into a focused determination. She would start gathering statistics from her proposed survey, crafting a narrative that would resonate with management, a narrative of partnership, growth, and transparency. But amid her planning, another voice emerged, the one that made her second-guess herself. What if she miscalculated? What if Brian saw right through her tactics? But that doubt was a hurdle to rise above, not an anchor to weigh her down. The following days were a blur of drafting, editing, and refining her proposal. She reached out to colleagues for insight, gathering their perspectives, which would not only cement her understanding but bolster her position when facing Brian. As she prepared for the upcoming confrontation, she felt the weight of inevitability in the air, a moment looming on the horizon that could either elevate her to new heights or plunge her into chaos. Just days before the pivotal meeting, she came across an alarming piece of information about Brian that shook her deeply. What if this revelation could prove her case or derail it entirely? The precarious balance of her plan now hinged on this new twist. Would she use it to her advantage, or would that be a misstep she'd regret? The clock was ticking and the walls were closing in. Sarah paced the confines of her small office, trying to absorb the implications of what she had discovered. The report she stumbled upon detailed Brian's questionable ethical dealings from years past, financial entanglements that could challenge his credibility. The power this information held sent a tremor of unease coursing through her. Was it a lifeline or a loaded weapon she wasn't prepared to wield? In an attempt to regain focus, she flipped through her proposal. Slide after slide showcased her vision for the survey initiative, underpinning the necessity for workplace transparency. The irony was palpable. Here she was, in a battle for openness, while she contemplated using a secret that could sabotage the very core of Brian's authority. Wouldn't that betray the principles she was trying to instill within the company culture? The inner conflict consumed her thoughts. On one hand, potential exposure of Brian's past could grant her substantial leverage. On the other, it risked transforming the initiative into a personal vendetta rather than a movement for better workplace practices. Her instinct screamed to keep the focus on the overarching goals. But what if the truth was a necessary tool for achieving those goals? Her internal debate escalated when a text from Mark flashed on her phone. "How's the prep going? Are you ready for tomorrow?" "Ready as I'll ever be," she typed back, pausing for a moment to gather her composure. Every ounce of her being wanted to veer into the murky waters of leverage, but she recalled their earlier conversation, the need to foster a spirit of collaboration rather than conflict. "Just keep it data-driven," she whispered to herself, knowing that she had to confront Brian with integrity. The next day loomed ominously, the weight of anxieties eclipsed only by the dawning realization that the meeting wasn't merely about policies, but about her evolution as a leader. This was her stage, a critical moment to assert herself. As she arrived at the conference room, she felt the tension in the air blend with an electric sense of possibility. Brian entered last, his presence commanding silence. The stakes were set. As Sarah initiated the discussion, presenting the survey proposal with conviction, she felt the rehearsed words flow from her lips. "We need transparent feedback mechanisms if we are to improve our workforce environment," she stated, maintaining eye contact with Brian. However, as she spoke, a flicker of doubt seeped through her confidence. Perhaps Brian would dismiss her ideas outright, as he had done before. But in that moment of desperation, the alarming bits of information about Brian swirled back into her thoughts. Should she risk disclosing it if the conversation veered toward dismissal? The meeting progressed. Sarah articulated her ideas with clarity, aiming to establish a collaborative framework rather than igniting conflict. But each time Brian countered her points, she could feel the unease inside her swell, an unmistakable urge to wield the knowledge she held about him. Fighting against herself, Sarah pressed on. "We can work together to make this a success. I believe there's mutual interest here," she said, redirecting the discussion back toward mutual benefits. Brian's gaze hardened slightly, but rather than feeling intimidated, Sarah drew strength from her resolve. It wasn't merely about winning now, it was about setting a precedent for how they could all work together in the future. Despite her attempts to steer the conversation away from tension, Brian's dismissiveness cut deeper than any criticism. Sarah felt the weight of his gaze, sizing her up, searching for vulnerabilities. In that moment, she remembered Mark's words. Leadership is often about navigating difficult relationships. Suddenly, a new understanding dawned on her. This meeting was advancing her professional development, testing not only her strategies but her courage. It wasn't just about confronting Brian. It was about defining who she was as a leader. Just as a flicker of hope began to emerge, Brian leaned forward, a hint of something perilous playing at the corners of his mouth. "Sarah, let's not pretend we are on the same page here. You expose a weakness that I won't tolerate." His tone, confident and authoritative, sent a pulse of fear through her. But rather than back down, Sarah sensed a fire igniting within. "What if I told you we could use that weakness to build something stronger?" For a heartbeat, the room hung in tension, potential crackling in the air. Tomorrow would not only reveal her as a leader, but lay bare the true nature of alliances formed amidst darker truths. Would she stand her ground? Or would tomorrow's confrontation render her plans a mere whisper lost in the winds of conflict? With every passing moment, time felt like a coiled spring, loaded and ready to snap into an unpredictable future. The meeting had thinned the air around Sarah, a tangible silence pressing down on her as she contemplated Brian's chilling declaration. She could feel the heat of his scrutiny enveloping her, each second stretching into an eternity. Yet amidst the tension, she began to gather her thoughts, deliberately shifting her focus away from the past's lurking specters toward the horizon of possibility that beckoned. Struggling to contain her racing heart, Sarah recalled the countless hours spent perfecting the proposal and outlining her vision. It was more than just a professional exercise. It was the cornerstone of her aspirations. What she feared was the collapse of that vision should she falter now. Leaning slightly forward, she adopted a posture of assertion. "Brian, I believe transparency is not merely a weakness. It's an opportunity for growth, for us both." "Opportunities can often reveal liabilities," Brian interrupted, his sardonic tone slicing through her words. The dismissive manner with which he wielded his authority forced a wave of frustration to rise within her. But instead of yielding, she leaned deeper into her resolve. "True, but how can we harness that liability to foster trust among our team?" Sarah countered, her voice steadying. In that instant she recognized the power of questioning, using inquiry as a means to shift control back toward her. This wasn't merely a confrontation, it was an opportunity to craft a narrative that highlighted collaboration. Brian's irritation flickered in his eyes, yet Sarah remained undeterred. This was a test not just of her ideas, but of her identity as a leader. The more he pushed, the deeper her understanding of her convictions grew. Each response felt like a step toward proving her worth, not just to Brian but to herself. "We cannot move forward by ignoring shadows cast by one's past. Instead, let's acknowledge them, use them to deepen our commitment to ethical practices," she pressed, challenge glinting in her eye. The risk was palpable, but she sensed a subtle shift in the room's dynamic. She could not forget the report she had found, but wielding it as a weapon did not align with her vision. Her focus needed to remain on the bigger picture, on initiating change grounded in truth, not deceit. For a brief moment, an unguarded vulnerability flickered across Brian's usually stoic facade. "And if I refuse to engage?" he asked, tone a mix of defiant bravado and concealed trepidation. "You risk waiting for others to challenge the status quo," she replied steadily. "Leadership isn't merely about control, Brian, it's about influence. We have the chance to reshape our company's culture together. Isn't that a legacy worth considering?" As she spoke, Sarah felt a powerful sense of agency awaken within her. She recognized that the only legacy worth forging was one of integrity, even in the face of opposition. Each word became a stepping stone toward a future where accountability and openness thrived. Brian seemed to pause, deliberating her challenge. The flicker of uncertainty in his expression hinted at doubt, a crack in his previously impenetrable armor. It was not a resounding victory, but it was a moment of possibility. Suddenly thoughts of the report invaded her mind. What if it contained the key to transforming her vision into reality? If strategy and integrity could coexist, could Brian's resistance become an ally rather than an adversary? Just then, the sharp ring of Sarah's phone broke the tension in the air. Her heart raced as she glanced at the screen. It was Mark, his name lighting the room like a flare. What would he say? Would he affirm her, or aggravate her doubts? "Let me take this," she said, a hint of breathlessness taking hold of her voice as she stepped out of the meeting room. With each stride, she felt the weight of the conversation recede slightly, replaced by a rising uncertainty about what awaited across that threshold. The anxious minutes hung heavily as she pressed the green button, not knowing if she was ready to embrace whatever revelation came next. "Sarah, it's important. I might have found something about the audit that changes everything." The world spun around as her thoughts collided with the urgency in Mark's tone, and in that moment, the course of her journey flickered with new potential. Would this new discovery fortify her stance against Brian, or would it threaten to dismantle everything she had fought for? The meeting had left its mark deep in Sarah's psyche, but as she stood in the corridor listening to Mark's words, a sudden wave of determination surged within her. The stakes had grown too high to falter now, and the moment felt ripe with the possibilities that could unravel if she approached this correctly. "What did you find?" she asked, her voice steady, holding back the whirlwind of emotions threatening to erupt. "It seems that there are discrepancies in the financial documents stemming from Brian's department. Nothing criminal, but enough to raise eyebrows," Mark explained, his tone low and serious. "We need to tread carefully. If we confront him with this, it could get ugly." "Ugly or not, we have to take action," Sarah asserted, the adrenaline thrumming in her veins. This wasn't just about her career anymore. It was an ethical imperative. We need to ensure transparency. If there's any chance that exposing these discrepancies could lead to accountability, we have to consider it. "I won't let fear dictate our actions." Mark paused, likely weighing her words, but Sarah pressed on. "We can use this to frame the conversation in a broader context. Present it not as an attack, but as an opportunity for growth and improvement. We have a moral responsibility to uphold integrity, not just in our dealings but in our leadership. Brian needs to understand that." After a moment of contemplation, Mark nodded reluctantly. "If we frame this constructively, it might just serve as a catalyst for the changes you're advocating. But this challenge won't come without its battles, Sarah. Are you ready for what might come next?" "I've already begun this journey," she answered, conviction flowing through her. "This is my chance, not just for me, but for the company and its future. We cannot thrive on hollow successes built on compromised ethics. The legacy we leave is far more important than corporate appearances." Mark's expression shifted, a glimmer of admiration crossing his features. "All right, let's prepare for this together. I'll support you, but we need a solid plan." They spent the next few hours tirelessly going through the evidence, drafting a strategy that would clarify their intentions and emphasize the need for an ethical renaissance within the company. Sarah felt invigorated. This was empowerment through action, a tangible result of her determination. She even crafted talking points that cohesively bridged the discrepancies into a call for culture change, centering around employee wellness and community impact. That evening she felt alive. Her previous fears had dissipated like morning mist, replaced with a solid confidence that she would tackle the challenges ahead head-on. The next day promised confrontation, and she was more than ready. Back in the conference room, the tension was electric. Sarah stood before her colleagues, Mark at her side, the new evidence poised like an arrow ready to fly. As she began to speak, the conviction in her voice resonated throughout the room. "Today is pivotal. We will address the discrepancies that threaten our integrity and values. We have the opportunity to not just correct wrongs, but to reinforce our commitment to ethical practices." As she spoke, her confidence flourished. Colleagues began to lean forward, captivated by her passion. She shared the discrepancies and articulated how transparency could lead to a stronger collective future. Throughout the meeting, Brian's demeanor shifted from defensive to contemplative, and Sarah could sense the tension fracturing. "This isn't an attack on you, Brian," she assured, her tone composed. "It's a reflection of a shared responsibility we all have to forge a culture built on honesty and trust." The dialogue that followed felt dynamic. Brian began to thaw under the pressures of collaboration rather than confrontation. Mark's support lent the necessary weight, allowing managerial tension to shift into something cooperational. "Perhaps it's time we unearthed these old practices and wrote a new chapter," Brian finally conceded, the hard edges of his previous attitude softening. "Let's pivot toward rebuilding." As they wrapped up the meeting, Sarah felt an overwhelming wave of satisfaction wash over her. This moment was a testament to her transformation. She had moved from a passive employee to an assertive leader, advocating for ethical change within her organization. The once dark clouds of self-doubt had parted, revealing a path toward accountability and integrity for both herself and her company. In the days that followed, Sarah channeled this momentum into action, establishing a task force dedicated to upholding company values and ensuring employee voices were not only heard, but embraced. Her reputation blossomed as a leader, one driven not by profit, but by principles. As she walked through the office that morning, employees greeted her with nods of respect, smiles that underscored a newfound sense of community. She realized they acknowledged the change she had forged in their environment, a fulfillment that transcended simple job titles. Now, she stood at the very pinnacle of her professional journey. Not only had she demonstrated her capacity to confront ethical challenges, but she had transformed from a fearful secretary into an empowered advocate for integrity. In doing so, Sarah had not only reclaimed her father's legacy but built upon it, ensuring that the lessons of the past would guide them toward a healthier corporate future. This was her victory, not only for herself, but for every employee seeking a voice. The echo of this transformation was far-reaching, and as she embraced her journey ahead, Sarah understood that integrity would always be her compass. She had conquered her doubts and emerged as a beacon of hope. If you resonated with Sarah's journey and the triumph over challenges, you need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support by leaving a like to help spread these vital stories. Don't wait even one more second. Comment your thoughts or theories about Sarah's journey to the end, and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this inspiring conclusion. Together, let's cultivate a community of personal overcoming, and your engagement makes all the difference.